Okay, so here is mother and son. Roughly 1,000 pound cattle, 920 pound weaning weight calf. Man, I am good. But in a minute, you're going to hear the rest of the story. Those of you old enough to remember Paul Harvey are giggling. Those of you who are not have no idea what I'm talking about. So I'm going to tell you the rest of the story, but it completely illustrates a point. So on average, 80% of the expenses involved in a typical cow-calf herd revolve around producing feed. 80% of those costs revolve around winter feed. And this percentage has been going up rather dramatically, actually. Why is that? Because machinery has been going up. Anybody bought machinery in the last 5 years? When the price of corn goes up, what happens to the price of machinery? It goes up. When the price of corn goes down, what happens to the price of machinery? It goes up. Supply and demand has no impact whatsoever on the machinery market, it seems like. So we use machinery to make hay and feed hay. So if you want to eliminate your cost of production, I saw an economic analysis where they tracked all different kinds of variables and the impact they had on profitability in a grazing livestock operation. 50% of the variability in profitability was explained by winter feed cost. The second highest variable was depreciation on breeding livestock, and it explained 9%. What color of bull you used was like less than 1% of the variability. So all these seed catalogs that people seed stock catalogs that people pour over, it doesn't really make a difference in profitability. What it does is what most people are completely ignoring. How much does it cost you to get your animals through the winter? So what does it actually cost you to produce hay? These are from Kansas State University's Custom Rates Handbook. This is the average of custom rates. These are people doing it commercially. They're running thousands of bales through their equipment per year. If you are an average producer, not a commercial hay operator, an average producer, are these numbers higher or lower? Much higher. Much higher. So, but wait, it gets worse, because not only do you have the value of the hay itself, but you've got the cost of all the machinery to deliver that hay. And all of that happens for free, right? I own all the equipment, so it doesn't cost me anything. So we're going to go through a little exercise here. Equipment depreciation exercise. So we're going to figure out just how much this depreciation expense works for you. So if you buy a $100,000 tractor and you sell it a few years later for $30,000, it's got 1,000 running hours on the meter. How much did it cost you every hour you ran it in depreciation alone?
$70.
$70. Is that surprising? No, that's actually pretty typical. My brother has 105 horse tractor, and he leases it to the family corporation, $65 an hour, and complains constantly about how he's getting ripped off. Okay? But wait, it gets even worse. It burns fuel. 75 to 100 horse tractor will burn about 5 gallons of diesel an hour, and that's about $20 an hour right there. And it keeps going downhill. Repairs. Who's got a repair on a tractor lately? They give those away for free almost, don't they? And nothing on this chart, which seems ridiculous. Last time I checked, $195 an hour. And I asked the guys in the shop, are you getting paid that? He giggled. No. Someone's making that because that's what I'm getting charged, $195 an hour for tractor repairs. And that doesn't include parts. That's just the labor. And the parts, you spend like $50 for a bolt on tractors. The hired labor is easy to figure. It's whatever you're paying. What was his name on Green Acres? Ned? I forget. But how do you figure your own labor? Well, people say, oh, I don't charge myself anything. Said, well, obviously you have absolutely nothing to do. Come work for me for free. Oh, you don't understand. I get up 5 o'clock in the morning, work till 7 o'clock the next morning every day. I'm so busy, I just can't, well, then your time is valuable. If it's scarce, it's valuable. So what did it really cost you to feed those 2 bales of hay? Well, if it took you an hour, 2 bales of hay, plus the depreciation, plus the prorated repairs, all your repairs, divide by your number of running hours, hour of fuel, hour of labor, hour interest, hour insurance, $265. Is that shocking? You say, well, that's what you got to do. Okay. It keeps getting worse, people. The Section 179 trap. Who's familiar with Section 179 in the IRS code? If you're a farmer, you think this is your friend. This is like you may already be a winner. Just come to our free presentation on timeshare options and you get a free vacation. It's the same kind of trap. Now, this can be a useful tool, but here's how it works in real life. You make $100,000 profit, okay? Hypothetically, of course, we're farmers. That means you owe about $30,000 in taxes. You say, I already spent everything I made. I don't have $30,000. What can I do? So you ask your accountant. He said, oh, this is easy. You just buy $100,000 worth of machinery. You said, well, I don't have 30,000. I definitely don't have 100,000. Oh, no problem. Buy it on a 5-year plan. You only got to put 20,000 down. So I'm making 10,000. What a deal. Sign me up. And if you get a real friendly machinery dealer, it doesn't even make you pay the 20,000 down. Put it all on payments. So what happens? You get toys. And wife gets a vacation because you got $10,000 you didn't know you're going to have. Money from heaven. But the next year, all that equipment you bought for 100,000 is worth 50, and you owe 80,000 on it. And you still don't have any money. So what do you do next year? You sign up for another payment plan and apply your tax savings to. And this is the death spiral of farmers. Well-intentioned, but just you lost 50,000 in equity to save 30,000 in taxes. Every year you do this, you just keep digging the hole deeper. So I told you the rest of this. I'd tell you the rest of the story. 920-pound weaning weight, 1,000-pound cow, first calf heifer. Sounds impressive. But he was 13 months old. Because my herd calves in May. And I bought open heifers that weren't open. And I had January 1st, 3 feet of snow. I checked my cows and there were 4 black dots out in the snow. I had newborn calves. Like, oh, no. So my May calving herd, as I'll explain later, we're out on dormant native grass, a little protein supplement. Cost me almost nothing to run those cows. You can't do that with a lactating heifer and expect her to rebreed. So these cows, they got separated, put in a pen, and they were fed alfalfa hay for 4 months. 920-pound calves, the rest of the herd weaned at 9 months, and they were 816 pounds. When I took them to auction, those 4 sold for $16 a head more than the other calves. Can you buy 4 months of alfalfa hay for $16? If you can, put me in touch with wherever you're getting that stuff. I want in on that. So I lost a lot of money. And then it dawned on me. This is what all my neighbors do with every head. They all calve in January and February, what they call spring calving. Because January and February are spring, right? So I'm going to make an assumption here. I think this is fairly accurate for most folks. Average daily gain on a suckling calf is a little over 2 pounds a day. Usually just a little bit more than this, maybe 2.1, 2.3, somewhere in there. How much does that calf gain per day? First of all, what is the value of calf gain per pound? Well, 600 pounders sell for $3. And these are all hypothetical numbers. Plug your own in. You can figure this out and do the math the same as I do. Let's just say 600 pounders sell for $3 a pound, 500 pounders sell for $3.40. What's the value of a pound of gain? Most people say, oh, $3. No, it's not. You calculate it out. 600 pounders worth $1,800, 500 pounders worth $1,700. So that 100 pounds of gain only gained you $1 a pound. Make sense? Okay. So your profit of the calf gain per day, your expense has to be under $2 in order to make money. Can you feed hay to a lactating cow for under $2? If you can, I need to know your secret. Okay, so let's just go through this. Again, these are just assumed numbers. You can do the same thing. I'm assuming a lactating cow and calf consumes about 45 pounds of hay a day. And a lactating cow needs high quality hay. So 8 cents a pound, 45 pounds a day, that's $3.40 a day. Is this a money-making situation? Oh, you're losing pretty big, right? And that does not include any cost of delivering that. And the example I showed you earlier, it cost more to deliver the feed than it did the value of the hay itself. This is why people don't make money in the cattle business or any other livestock business. How much it costs them to do this process. So let's make one change. Instead of calving in January or February, let's change this cow to calving in May when there's green grass. And so you're not feeding a lactating cow, you're feeding a dry cow. So she's going to eat 30 pounds instead of 45, and you can get by with low quality hay. You can get by just regular grass hay. That's $80 a ton or 4 cents a pound, half the cost and 2/3 as much. That's $144 for the winter. That's a lot different than 400 and some, isn't it? And you're hauling less. So your hauling expense is way less. So that's saving you $260 a head right there. So, but what if we don't feed hay at all? You know, oh, that don't work around here. You don't understand. We can't do that around here. I've heard that every single place I've been. I've heard it in North Dakota, heard it in Montana. Oh yeah, we got long winters. I've heard it in Houston. You don't realize how long our winters are here. We just can't do that right now. It's either too wet, too dry, too cold, or too warm. Folks, too wet and too dry are kind of working at opposite ends. So's too warm and so's too cold. There's always an excuse. You can stockpile grass. Some grass is stockpiled better than others. You see orchard grass in Timothy, kind of where you guys are. Tall fescue is the best. Meadow brome, which I think is a grass with a lot of potential around here, one of the better ones. This is from Jim Garish, his ratings. Alsite clover, bird's foot, trefoil, which grow very well here. Also some of the better legumes. This picture of tall fescue, this is basically monoculture tall fescue. I'm not big on promoting monocultures, but this is probably the single best grass for stockpiling. This photo is close to my property, and I took this on New Year's Eve 4 years ago. And then the quality of that. So this is prairie hay. This would be native grass hay cut in my area. Not great quality hay, kind of lower end grass hay. But look at fescue, even in February, is still better feed than what we feed them for hay. But here's the real problem with stockpiling. Everybody's seen this grass curve, right? So if you have a stocking rate to use this grass over the course of about 6 months, come the 1st of November, how much grass do you have left? It's all gone, right? Because if you're stocking for this, you're running short here. You can't graze in February what you already grazed off in October or September or November. You need to.
You have a pointer on your clicker. There's a
Ah.
little, yeah, there should be a.
This little dealy wop right there.
There you go.
Okay. This is something I can take and aim at like official size during football games and stuff when my team's getting beat. No. You can't graze it. So how do you manage this? How do you manage the spring surplus? You have excess grass in spring and insufficient grass the rest of the year. How do you manage that? Well, here's one way of doing this. And that's, I started to talk about warm season grasses. We'll dive more into warm season grasses here in a bit, but allow the stockpiling of cool season grass. So if you transition to warm season grass here about the 1st of June, just as it explodes and takes off, use this as your summer grazing. Essentially, you graze hard here, kind of knock the seed heads off, clip it if you need to, and start accumulating a great big stockpile of growth that can last you. And just think about it. If you don't graze June, July, August here, that's 3 months you didn't graze this. That's 3 more months you can graze here. And so this is very simple grazing schematic. Cool season grass in spring, warm season grass in summer, cool season grass in fall, and as far into the winter as you can go. And what I've seen is that 3 months of rest buys you way more than 3 additional months in the fall because the grass gains vigor through that extended rest period. And people say, well, yeah, but you lose so much quality. What's the quality of the hay you're feeding? That stockpile grass is going to be way better than hay. Oh, but what about that warm season grass in winter? Quality's awful. But you know what? About 450 million buffalo did pretty well. It's really deficient in protein. But if you supplement with protein, this can be really useful feed for a dry cow. And you know what it'll do so much better than bluegrass or orchard grass? It sticks up above snow. If it didn't, there would be no such thing as bison for Buffalo Bill to go out and kill. It would have gone extinct. Every snowfall would have just wiped them out. This can be very useful winter feed for a dry cow. But if you're calving in January or February, this is useless. If, however, you calve in sync with your green growing season, all of a sudden, this dormant native grass becomes useful feed. Now, let's take a look at this program. And what did we have before? Lactating cow fed high quality hay, $400 for the winter. Dry cow fed low quality grass hay, May calver was $144. See what this costs. So here's the neat thing. You're feeding high quality hay, but you only feed it every third day. That actually works better than feeding it every day. So you cut your labor by 2/3. You cut your feed costs because you're only giving them about 1/6 of their total diet. That's 60 cents a day on average. It's $72. And 2/3 of the day, you just sit in the house and watch Oprah or The View or whatever you want to watch. God forbid you watch The View, though. So let's compare the total cost. And I put in $20 a ton hauling charge, which is really low. Take a look at this. High quality hay, dry cow with low quality hay. $40,000 a year difference between those programs. $40,000 a year. How many people do you know make less than that as their entire salary for the year? This is just the difference. Calving date and wintering program. Oh, but it gets better. What if you could winter them for free? That's better yet, right? You know, close to free. This works in places. So this would be something like in Oklahoma where they have wheat and native grass. The cropland's wheat rotated with wheat, and they had native grass. Now the wheat, or you could do this with a rye cover crop on your cropland. Not a lot of volume there, but it's got great quality, high protein. Then the dormant native grass has no protein, but there's a lot of material there. What if you could blend the two? You can with this concept called time limit grazing. In time limit grazing, you tell the cows to go out there, said eat 18 pounds of that, and then come back over here and fill up. How it works, right? Yeah, they all follow that plan. Well, you can use something called, you can turn them out there and then chase them off, or you can use this concept called a fish trap gate. And everybody's seen how a fish trap works, like a minnow trap. You've got a cone, and they can get in, but they can't figure out how to get. That's what this alley over here does. You got it shaped like a funnel or a cone. And so You open this gate, here's your green, here's your brown. Go out here, you have water here, but not out here. They fill up, then they want to go get water. So they walk this fence, they walk through this alleyway, get water, and then they'll come back over here, bawl for an hour, wanting back on this, and you don't let them. This is shut now. And Abe was trying to tell me cows are smart. They're not smart enough to figure out that all they got to do is walk backwards and then go down this alleyway and then get back out there, and they never figure it out. Because number one, they're dumb. Number two, they're not smart like pigs. Number two, they don't have stereo vision. They don't have depth perception. Their eyes are on the side of their head. They can't tell unless they're looking straight down it. And you can curve that a little bit so there's no visible sight line out into the green stuff, and they'll never figure it out. In fact, angle it a little bit away from the water works even better. Or, hey, we're talking about doing a better job of photosynthesis. That native grass, that warm season grass, only photosynthesizes like the corn about 4 months, 4 or 5 months out of the year. And the sun shines for 12. Let's use it. You can't mix warm season and cool season perennial grasses very well, but you can put in annual cool season grasses. This is rye and winter peas and hairy vetch drilled into a stand of pastured off native grass in the fall. In the fall, they can move over to cool season perennial grass, and which I think maybe you can see over here in this corner. See that green? That greener pasture? That's cool season grass. And this is what it looks like in March. This is, and makes much firmer sod. It'll hold animals up. You don't have the pugging issues. And yeah, there's not enough rye out there to carry the herd, but it doesn't need to be. You strip graze this off and they'll eat correct balance. They eat a little brown with the green. They have to. Okay. Now here's another option. Because remember, on cool season grasses, we have this massive spring productivity and lesser fall productivity. We'd like to have more fall productivity because that's going to help get us through the winter. So this is the sunlight, these are warm season grasses we call C4. And here's your cool season grass, C3. That's different photosynthesis methods that each have. So your cool season grasses hit peak photosynthesis at about 50% of full sun. Here's full sun over to the right. Warm season grasses keep increasing as you add more sunlight. Cool season grasses, they top out at 50%. So in June, July, August, when we have massive amounts of sunlight, cool season grasses are actually going down in productivity versus May or April. What a waste. So what do we do about that? So, okay, here's 1.5 tons an acre. This is smooth brome, one of our primary cool season grasses in Kansas. And this is after a very wet summer, boot top high, and that's it. That's pretty good. Should be happy with that. Well, can we do better? This is the same field. That was looking to the west. This is looking to the east. And so the renter was trying to convince the landlord that this was a good practice. So he went out after he baled hay. This was a hay meadow. Baled hay June 20th. And then drilled in these summer annuals. And I think you asked about this, putting summer annuals into a cool season grass mix. That's exactly what he did. The yellow flowered stuff is sun hemp, a big tall growing tropical legume. This stuff is pearl millet. There's corn in here. There's sorghum in here. Here's some cowpeas. Here's some sunflower. There's some buckwheat. Big multi-species. And this is 3 tons per acre. So you got double the amount of fall grazing here accumulated. Use that surplus of summer sun to create more fall grazing. But wait, it gets better. Check this out. What makes the soil better? Oxygen. How do you get, what's that? If you could measure one thing in the soil, look at it on a soil test, say this is better soil. The organic matter, where's organic matter come from? Microbes. Where do the microbes get their energy? Root exudates. You think this has more root exudates than the other one? Especially in July, August? Absolutely. So the next picture was taken a quarter mile away within a few minutes of this photo. The same soil, same mix of plants. This is where he's been doing this for 5 years. First, oops, going the other way. So this is the first year he's done it here. Same soil, same rainfall, adjacent fields. This is 5 years of the same practice. Look at the difference in productivity, 6 3/4 ton.
And is he drilling that one season annual mix into the hope hayed off smooth brome?
Yes. Yep. So this is essentially surplus crop because that brome is barely using the sunlight. In fact, now what he was trying to prove to his landlord by splitting the field in half, his landlord saw this and said, "You're not doing that to my ground. You're not killing my brome out." So he measured the hay production on both sides, and the brome with the summer annuals in it did 700 more pounds of hay per acre than the side without this. Better soil. A lot of those are legumes. You get nitrogen, but most valuable, you get root exudates. And one of the guys I talked into doing this, been doing it for 6 or 7 years now. He said he was moving his step-in fence post. And the first year he did this, when he moved the step-in fence post, he had to carry a cordless drill with him, poke holes in the ground because the ground was so hard in August. And he said, "Hey, wait a minute. It's just as dry as it was 5, 6 years ago or whenever it was when I started this. The posts are going in like a knife through butter." Just amazing how much better the soil becomes when you do this. And this has been one of the rock stars. Cucurbits, pumpkins, gourds, squash. For overwintering cattle, gourds are awesome. They do not rot in the winter. They're good the following June. I picked them and ate them myself the next June from one of these overwintering mixes. Works great in with fescue. Pumpkins are, and we do watermelons as well, which aren't, I don't know if they're cucurbits or not, but they're vine crop like this. And everywhere you get an open spot in the stand, you get a pile of fruit. And that's taking summer sunlight and converting into a high energy package for the fall or winter. And you think, well, but I got to drag the drill out there every year. Well, why not use a perennial? What's a perennial that can use summer sunlight to create an abundance of high energy concentrated feed in the fall? How about apples? You can't sell these apples. Probably don't even want to eat them yourself, but something can. Maybe you let them all drop. Maybe you sell these, and maybe these get eaten. And the other neat thing is that, okay, if there's a codling moth here, there's scab, there's rust, animals consume those, and those organisms are taken out of the orchard. They're digested. Codling moth larvae are protein, man. Pigs, cows like protein. This is maybe the most interesting tree. This is honey locust. Now, ordinarily, honey locust has thorns that are like swords, big, long, they're daggers, and they're toxic. And so things avoid this plant. But this is a thornless honey locust. These pods, I'll show you this. See all this? This is pure sugar. Honey locust pod of a millwood variety will be about 35 to 40% sugar, which is about double the sugar content of a sugar beet or sugar cane. This is concentrated energy. And when they dry, they get this spiral shape. So that means most of this fruit is not in contact with the soil. It allows it to persist over the winter. Now, one place they've researched this is Virginia Tech. Just take a look at these numbers. So here's tall fescue out in the open. Here's fescue under the trees. Well, how come it's better? Well, remember, all that top half of sunlight doesn't do the fescue any good. And these trees are legumes. They're adding a little nitrogen to the system. So on top of this, you get another 800 pounds of grass per acre, but you get this 4,300 pounds an acre of pods on top. And the fescue, that stockpile fescue, is pretty good protein, but it's kind of so-so for energy. What's this stuff? What do we feed corn silage for? Energy. This is the net energy of lactation, the book value for corn silage. Here's an analysis of millwood honey locust pods, identical to corn silage. Folks, you add fescue, stockpiled fescue, and this together, you've essentially got a dairy ration. And you don't have to do any work. God does it for you. What a great deal. Corn stalks. Everybody knows you can pasture corn stalks, right? You can, most people don't. Let's assume you do. Let's just say you're continuous grazing corn stalks and there's 2 bushel of corn on the ground. When you turn cows out in the corn stalks, what's the first thing they eat?
Grain.
Grain. They ate the ears that dropped, that didn't get harvested. Let's assume you got 2 bushel on the ground or 112 pounds an acre. Put cattle out there, 1 cow per acre for a month. That's the standard Corn Belt recipe. So for 4 days, they eat 30 pounds of grain per day, and then nothing but stalks for 26. What happens when you give a cow a full ration of grain, which is not adjusted to it?
Acidosis.
She gets acidosis. And I'll show you. This is what the inside of a rumen is supposed to look like. This is rumen from an animal with acidosis. See all these fingers called papillae are missing. They've literally been dissolved away by acidosis. This animal is no longer a functioning rumen. She runs out of grain, now she's in trouble. It takes about 6 weeks for the inside of a rumen to heal, which when people feed grain in the winter and then turn them out to grass, a lot of times they crash. This also is responsible for the very short longevity of Corn Belt cows. This is not good for an animal. Absolutely not good. So, what do you do about it? Well, you strip graze. Start at the water source, and you just keep leapfrogging this fence away from the water source. One day, you just. Now, here's what people say is they say, well, I ain't got time for that. You don't realize how busy I am. What are you doing? I'm fixing the tractor, I'm fixing the baler, I'm fixing the feeder wagon, I'm fixing the mixer wagon, fixing this. Why are you fixing all that stuff? Well, I have to feed hay. Well, if you don't have to feed hay, what if the only thing you have to do is move that fence? Well, I can't afford to do that. Well, instead of 30 pounds of grain for 4 days and then, the 20, 30 pounds of stalks the rest of the time, they eat a balanced diet. 4 pounds of grain, that's not enough to cause acidosis. It's less than 0.5% of body weight, which is kind of the threshold where you get acidosis. You double the cow days per acre. Wow. Instead of grazing for 60 days, which is standard in my part of the world, 60 days on stalks, November, December, this takes you to the 1st of March. What happens in the 1st of March? What's almost over in the 1st of March? Winter. So how much does that make you? So if you do the math, you save $26 per head, and I think that's really lowballing it. You spend 15 minutes a day moving that fence. That is $277 an hour for your time investment. How many of you would stoop to working for $277? Be a bitter pill to swallow, wouldn't it? But this is actually what it can save you. And I think that's lowball. But wait, you can do better. Instead of just corn stalks by themselves, here's where a winter cover crop, rye, winter peas, and turnips were drilled in after corn harvest to add to the value. But most of this is not available until spring, but a month of grazing in spring can be pretty valuable because this comes on before perennial pastures are ready. Well, but it doesn't give you fall grazing, but this does. This is an aerial seeding of annual ryegrass and turnips. And this is the day of corn harvest. Look at all that feed out there. Now, corn stalks are seriously deficient in protein. What's all this stuff high in? Protein. So you strip graze this out, and they eat some grain, they eat some leaves, and they eat all this green. And you've turned maintenance feed for a dry cow into milking feed. Take a look at that. Look at all that feed the day of harvest. Now, here's how to do it even better. So this is interseeding a cover crop in between the crop rows. Now, this is 60-inch row corn. And you say, why would you space it out like that? This reduces the corn yield about 10% over 30-inch rows. Say, why would you do that? That's going backwards. But the cover crop yield, they interseeded this cover crop when the corn is what we used to call cultivation stage, but the cover crop yield goes up fourfold. Instead of a ton per acre, you got 4 tons an acre. So I lose 20 bushel of corn, but I gain 3 tons of feed per acre. You do the math. That's a pretty good deal. Because that feed is worth a lot more. 3 tons of feed is worth more than 20 bushel of corn.
A lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is phenomenal quality. Now what the people, this is at the Minoka farm in North Dakota. This is the guy who taught Gabe Brown about regenerative agriculture, Jay Fuhrer, runs this farm. And so they use this to fatten feeder steers. This was 3 pounds of gain a day on a fat animal. They didn't even combine the corn. And that species there, sorry, the species there is Bayou kale. So another option to use cropland to winter animals, this was planted, this is a sterile forage sorghum that was planted double crop after wheat harvest. So wheat harvest would have been late June. This is in Oklahoma. Actually early June there, planted after that. And then the day this photo was taken, it was 20 below zero. Cows look quite happy out there. Now you can do even better than that. Now this was, you see the swath here? Forage sorghum a swath and then went in between the swaths and drilled rye. So you could add some protein supplement to that stockpiled sorghum. Just makes it a little bit more nutritionally complete. You can see the cows lined up over here. This was my place. I learned my lesson. You're better off to run the fence perpendicular to the swaths, not with the swath. Because they got to shaking this stuff around and they tangled up in the fence. They're constantly knocking the fence down. So you run it perpendicular. And the other thing I found out is if they don't eat the entire swath in a day, it becomes really expensive bedding. Other than that, the concept worked really well. And the swath sorghum has a wax on it that keeps it from rotting, doesn't soak up water in the winter like corn residue does. So August planted cover crops. So these are some of the things you plant in August. And actually corn can make a lot of biomass planted in August before frost. Even though it only has 30, 40 days, it can make a lot of growth in that time period. This is oats. These were planted in mid-August. Oats and radishes. This made about 200 grazing days per acre in November. If you're familiar with how grazing days are calculated, I had 4 cows an acre out there for 3 weeks, something like that. So do the math. This is a cover crop that was planted in October. This is a mixture of cereal rye and hairy vetch. You see there's the ruler, 30 inches high. Measured the biomass on this, and this was actually primarily used, it was roller crimped down and used as a source of nitrogen fertility on popcorn, all of this. And 0 nitrogen, I think 110 bushel popcorn, which is a great popcorn yield. And this is an organic farmer. Roller crimping hairy vetch that was planted in October. He's crimping this in late May. Planter on the back, no tilling right into that. He's organic, no herbicide, no tillage, no fertilizer. And here's the field. No herbicide, no tillage, and no weeds, no fertilizer. 195 bushel bin corn. That was irrigated. That's no fertilizer. Another option, so this is obviously summer because that's sorghum, sudan, sunflowers. These are all summer crops. Say, well, how does that help me in the winter if I don't bale it? Well, by grazing the summer crop, just like grazing the warm season perennial grasses, that allows you to rest and stockpile your cool season perennial pastures so that they can be grazed later in the fall. And that allows you to stretch that feed on further down into the winter. This was planted double crop after wheat. I think you can see the cow in there. This is a mixture of sun hemp and cowpeas. And in this biomass, there's over 200 pounds an acre of nitrogen. Look at all that stuff. So this is not only cattle feed, this is the nitrogen for next year's corn. This is 90 days after planting. And look at all this mulch. That's soil conservation. That's beneficial insect habitat, ladybugs and lacewings like you would not believe in here. Because you attract a number of species of aphids. Cowpea aphids in here that don't affect any other crop, but man, they go from these cowpea aphids and then they fly over and take care of some other aphid. And then if you're going to feed hay, remember it was the feeding of the hay was actually more expensive than the hay itself. Getting the machinery out of the equation is so important. What if you only had to have that machinery to feed those animals one day? You don't need them 365, you need them one day. And that's what space bale feeding is. So I took this photo in Michigan. And here's what I like. The horizontal fence post. He said the ground freezes so hard they couldn't get their temporary fence post in the ground. Not a problem. You just stick them here. This never freezes solid. It worked perfect. And so what they do is they roll this up, expose a row of bales, move the bale rings over. You got your hay rings, you got your fence, and this diagram, I stole this diagram from the University of Missouri, but you put them, and I prefer 30-foot centers rather than 20-foot. 30-foot gives you uniform manure distribution. So this is like your bale grazing, space bale feeding, whatever you want to call it. Basically, you put the bales out on a grid on a dry day in the fall, and then you move polywire to ration it off. I have 2 wires set up and I just leapfrog them. Go over the other and then move the hay rings over. Some people don't use hay rings. I say, why don't you use hay rings? Said all that waste hay is beneficial to the ground. I said, yep, so's the manure it makes. And the process of creating that manure is a lot more profitable than just dumping hay out on the ground. So I like using the hay rings. I think it actually helps the pasture productivity where you don't have dead spots where those bales are. They clean it up. It's much better. So I use the hay rings. Some people don't. But here's one really neat thing about spaced bale feeding. That's your fertility transfer. So this is, I picked the worst spot on my first farm to do my space bale feeding, bale grazing. 1.5% organic matter. Of course, this is your main indicator of soil quality right here. And 16 part per million on the Bray phosphorus test. This is kind of low, lower than desirable. So 1 year of bale grazing, went to the same spot a year later, and this is what I came up with. This, if I had a confined feeding program, this level of phosphorus would actually start throwing up red flags for being in excess. And I dumped 100 pounds. This was 6, 2 years before. And I did variable rate applications of fertilizer. I put 100 pounds of available orthophosphate fertilizer to get it from 6 to 16. 1 year space bale feeding did 12 times more increase than what that massive expenditure on fertilizer made. This is how you fix soil, people. Now, this is temporary because all that manure, all that waste hay is not as good at feeding microbes. That's what root exudates are. But you get this kind of fertility in the ground, then you can start growing plants where you couldn't before. You get this organic matter, you get this fertility. Now you can grow some plants. With plants, you can grow root exudates. So you can really start the ball rolling. for fertility transfer and soil improvement with the bale grazing. Yeah,
I've got 10 minutes for 2:30.
this is the last slide, so
Look at that.
in this presentation, so,
So I take a little break.
okay.
Everybody get up, stretch their legs.
On any questions before we do so? Yeah,
Not so much a question. I like your phrase, space bale feed, as a different thing than bale grazing. Bale grazing is a very specific concept, and this is different. And to have it, and a lot of people use the terms interchangeably when they're not the same thing at all. So I like this. I'm definitely going to use that term. I don't know where it came from, but it's a great way of describing this system. Whereas bale grazing is really something else, having much more dispersed bales than this.
Yeah.
So that's very useful.
yeah.
distinction.
And a lot of people use stuff interchange. Space bale feeding came from the University of Missouri. I like it too. And when I talk about it, people say, oh, bale grazing. Okay, yeah, if you want to call it that, but as long as we understand what we're talking. Yes,
On a bale, space bale feeding, taking the wrap off, or do you
yes.
pull it out of the ground the next year?
I have found that net wrap is is an absolute profit generator for people that sell bearings on tractor wheels. I hate that stuff out in pasture. I do not. And the problem about taking it off beforehand is you lose some of your weathering ability, your ability to shed water. The other thing is that if you don't use it all up throughout the course of a year, it's pretty hard to move those bales once the net wrap's off. So, if they had sisal net wrap, that would be great. The plastic that never breaks down is kind of problematic. I know people that just toss the whole bale in a grinder mixer or, and feed it to their cows. And I'm like, I got a problem with that. I don't want that stuff entering our food chain. The more we find out about plastics, the more there is to dislike about plastics ever touching our food. My wife refuses to get olive oil in a plastic container, glass only. She wants to get all the plastic out of our life.
Here.
Except the one the little card that she swiped. Said, that you're getting toxins every time you put that between your fingers. You better watch that. So, anything else?
Bring your wife next time too.
Yeah, she's a fascinating one. I'm not exaggerating when I say she always consistently outranks me when it comes to. The very first time I had her present, she really wasn't nearly as polished as she is now, but we talked in New Mexico, and this ranch owner, elderly woman who had, 250,000 acres or something outrageous, had like 8 cowboys that worked for her, and all these guys were, like the guys, when Clint Eastwood walks into the bar and there's all these rough guys sitting around at all the tables, that turn around and look at, that's what these guys looked like. They had their spurs on at the meeting and didn't bother to knock the manure off their boots. Had a spit cup in front of them. Half the spit went in the cup. Some of it went wherever. And they just sit there the whole time I was talking like this.
Right.
And and they put poor Elizabeth on the very last session. The only reason they had her said, well, if that's what it takes to get you here, we'll let her come on too. I said, yep, I insist. Said, you'll like what you hear. And they went around, and every one of those cowboys who absolutely did not want to be here, they were forced to come. Yeah, my favorite part, I think, was that blonde chick at the end. She really resonated with me. Explains a lot about my life. I don't think you can get any better testimony. So really made an impact on those guys who you'd think that something on their emotions would be the absolute last thing they'd want to hear. But it really impacted them. So, yeah.
There are some amazing things that you have there that we haven't done in Vermont. Like establishing a warm season prairie
Mhm.
and seeing what happens. Extension and the agencies aren't gonna do it, so it's gonna be on the farmers if we're gonna do it. A. B. Taking a hay crop in May, which is where you're gonna get decent hay, right? End of May, whatever. And putting in those drilled warm season annuals, was it 6.75 tons? Say we got 2 ton on the hay cut, that's 8.75 tons. So what, call it 8, whatever.
Big different, yeah. I mean, he went from about 3, not just shy of 4 tons annual yield
Yeah,
over the year to, around 9.
there's about 4 ton around here, it's real common, 5 mil per hay ground, right?
Mhm.
That's pretty astounding. We should be trying this stuff.
Yeah. What it does to the soil is the most impressive part. And you want wildlife habitat. Unbelievable compared to, cool season grass monoculture. Compared to what was there before. I mean, you can imagine all the turkey and deer and quail and everything else running around out there. Sasquatch. If you want to know why Sasquatch sightings are down, they're hiding in that stuff. Picking pumpkins. So doesn't have to leave. Yeah.
My cousin who just lives the next town over from me, she's got a very small Jersey milk operation, and the haying season has been all but completely disastrous this year. Just crazy weather. I'm just wondering if any of this would apply to dairy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Could she have these, those cover crops out here that's that tall and not have to put up so much hay?
absolutely. And, it's amazing. I go places and people say, oh, you can't do this with dairy. Well, why not? Well, really having a reason. I mean, there's some reasons, but they really don't hold up to scrutiny because I know people doing this stuff with dairy. The process of dairy essentially is to create as long a quality feed period and consistent quality feed as long as possible. There are some tricks you want to do with dairy. They're very sensitive to changes in feed consistency and feed quality. Dairy people understand forage quality so much better than beef people because you have a change in feed quality, you see it 12 hours later. Or, within a day, you see it in the milk tank. Beef, you see it a year later. And the people in the beef industry that are really on top of their grazing game are grass finishers. And the things that I recommend for grass finishing are really the exact same things I recommend for dairy. And that's consistent, high quality, 365 days a year grazing. If you achieve that, you can be extremely successful in both industries.
Dale, you showed us minus 20 degrees, but we didn't see a lot of snow. So I don't want to do that not around here thing, but with heavy snow depths, how are we managing? What are our best options?
In the next presentation,
Cool.
that's what we'll cover.
Thank
So, because snow, I'm going to cover disasters. How do you disaster proof your farm? So, yeah.
So the guy with the 6.75 tons, that's gonna be irrigated. So
No.
how do you think the warm season annuals fit in without irrigation?
That was not irrigated.
Rains on the end of May.
Yeah, that was not irrigated. That was a pretty wet year though, but that was natural rainfall. And about 30-inch rainfall and probably evapotranspiration rate roughly double yours. Open pan evaporation would be about 60 inches there. You get out in western Kansas, it's about 100. You get in Texas, it's like 120. Like 16-inch rainfall doesn't go very far. So wind, heat, humidity, or lack of humidity really makes a difference on how far your rain goes. So I know Wisconsin, we get less rain. Oh, I'm sorry.
So by their nature, the warm season annuals are adapted to much drier conditions. In what we would consider drought, they will still perform because they're adapted to grow during the dry time of the year.
Yeah.
So genetically, they're set up.
I drilled warm season annuals into cool season pasture, and every single time I did it, it didn't rain for the next 90 days. I began to think maybe I'm the guy causing this drought, so I quit. But and then I moved, but even though I never rained, my cool season pastures, and I'll show you a picture of what one of the summers, what those cool season pastures looked like when you get 13 inches of rain in 13 months. Orchard grass doesn't do well, not in my heat. I mean, we were 118 that summer as our high, and spent 3 solid weeks over 110. And orchard grass doesn't do well with that. And the only thing I had available to eat was what I drilled out there. And only got about 2 feet tall, but that was 2 feet of growth that I didn't have anywhere else. So it sure beat the orchard grass without it. It was an inch tall and crispy brown.
You ever have issues like establishing warm season grasses and warm season perennials and stuff? Like, if you do that thing of cutting hay and then drilling into it, like, is there a height that is best in terms of like?
Yeah. So
Dale, will you speak into the
Mike,
microphone?
yeah, sure. So the question was, how hard is it to establish warm season annuals in cool season perennials? It's not an every year slam down. So timing is important. And in my area, you want to do it right at the beginning of the summer slime. Because warm season grasses in particular do not like early competition. So you want to, when I talk about grazing management, I say, oh, always leave a big tall stubble on your cool season grasses and then taller stubble on your warm season perennials. When you want to establish warm season annuals, you want to take it down to about 2 or 3, which is one of the very few times I recommend doing that. But you want to get that canopy off. And yes, that does stress your cool season perennials, but you gain that back with this increased success of your warm season annuals. Ideally, I would do it right before it starts getting into the 90s temperature wise in my area. And the day before you get a 2-inch rain, and then it turns all hot. Now, I've never been able to time it that way. I can usually predict the 90s much better than I can the rain. But, and it's a little different. You plant a little deeper than you would in cropland because the sod roots tend to keep the furrow slice from closing back over. So the stand usually is not as good, and you don't want it to be a perfect stand. You want to let sunlight through. You want filtered sunlight making it through to the grasses below. You don't want a closed canopy like you do on cropland. So I usually do half the seeding rate of the same mix that I would on crop. Yeah.
Let's say you don't have a way to drill seed anything other than, say, a perennial silvo pasture system. Is there anything that could also be easier to do in another way or broadcast?
There are some species that work fairly well broadcast. Crabgrass is actually one that works well broadcast. It's and fairly shade tolerant compared for warm season grass. Crabgrass is amazingly shade tolerant. Most are not. Teth grass works pretty well, especially if you use cattle to kind of stomp it in. right after seeding. Broadcast it right before your last grazing pass. And then move to something else for the summer to allow it to get a little growth. Japanese millet, particularly in wetter areas, can be doing that. Now, if you have a pugging event, and one of the things we'll talk about, that's a reseeding opportunity or an interseeding opportunity, whichever way you want to view it. So